Today is a special day. Do you know why? You don't care. You only want cabbage. Today we are interviewing Nancy Tanner, raw food expert, dog training expert in a lot of things. She's a really fantastic woman who knows how to nourish a dog from the inside out, how to train them from the inside out. We'll tell you everything, right? So who is Nancy Tanner anyway? Well, Nancy is a CPDT-KSA certified dog trainer, award-winning writer, and photographer. She's the founding owner at Paws People and Border Farm. She's appeared on the Martha Stewart Show. She lives in Montana on her farm that is a blend of everything that she does and loves. Working with dogs, biodynamic gardening, nutrition, and her natural rearing breeding program. She specialized in puppy and adolescent training and development for over 2 decades and has lectured throughout the U.S., and she also teaches in person locally. Despite the fact that she mostly works with puppies, she also works with adults and seniors as well. And what you're gonna learn in this interview about deep nutrition, nourishing your dog from the inside out, training them from the inside out, what to do if you've adopted a senior dog and they're not trained at all, they don't have any manners, they don't know how to walk on the leash. We're gonna help you out with that. How to do stress relief for your senior dog so that we can close the door on any diseases that want to get in. This is a really special interview and you're gonna love it, right? You're gonna love it? More cucumber? All right, let's go to the interview, come on.
Okay.
All right, so we can start off. Tell me a little bit about Paws People and what exactly you do there.
So Paws People is my training business, and we started back in 2003. So in 1985, I worked on the Ski Patrol Canine Avalanche program in Utah. And that was my very first professional job with dogs. And so I was in my early mid-20s. I was put on the Canine Avalanche team. And for 4 years when I worked on Ski Patrol, that was my job. And so I worked with professional handlers and professional dogs. And then after that, I worked on farms and ranches around the world and did work off and on in the agricultural world with multiple species. And then I started competing in the dog world. And then I started training people, professional competitors in the dog world for competition. And then in 2003 is when, and that world's about this big, right? There's very few people in that world. So in 2003, I decided to start working with family pet owners, and then Paws People was born from that. Okay. And family pet owners has turned out to be the most challenging of all the work I've ever done in the canine world. You know, it's a whole different thing. And so, but our business is 21 years old this year. I work primarily in Montana, but I've traveled around the whole US, up into Canada and down into Mexico to give workshops and seminars and for professional teams, dog sporting teams, and family pet owners. And I think because I started off with professional teams and with professional dogs, and you know how your first influences are always the most important influences you have, like in anything that you do? Yeah. So back in the mid 1980s, the lead ski patroller on my Canine Avalanche team is still one of the most powerful influences of how I train and see dogs today. And it was always about the whole dog. It's not just about the work they provide you, but it's about the whole dog. And so Paws People has always been based on the whole dog, not just about teaching a dog sit. It's everything about the whole dog. Yeah. Right. So it's been pretty cool. And we've had, you know, a lot of reimaginations. We've had big, huge training gyms and training facilities over the years. I've trained in stockyards. I've trained in barns. I've trained out in pastures. I used to work in people's homes, and now we train on our farm. And I've always preferred working with my clients in a more natural dog environment. And so it's worked out really super well. Because dogs are more comfortable, you know, mucking around in hay and straw and dirt and snow and water. And if they're comfortable, we can do good work.
Something you said there it struck me when I was reading through some of your stuff, your website, and that is when you train a dog, you consider that you're training them socially, emotionally, physically, and nutritionally. And I think that's great for all dogs, but I think that has a special power for senior dogs. So, because obviously a lot of people adopt seniors, and that's great because now people are not thinking, oh, a dog's old, I don't want to, I always want a puppy. So if somebody came to you and said, listen, I just adopted this senior dog and they're the greatest dog ever, but they've never been trained, they have no manners, they have a complete inability to walk on a leash, what are some things you would recommend to them to get this older dog in form?
Yep. So senior is a lot of different years, right? A lot of different stages. So 4 to 6 is prime in the dog world. That's usually when they're at their cognitively best as well as their physically best. Right. And then, And then between like 6 and 9, 6 and 10, depending on the breed, the underlying health, is there vibrant health or is there disease? You still have a pretty powerful dog. It's just they don't kind of rebound as quick if they're pushed too much. And then from 10 to 15 or 10 to 16, I consider that the fragile senior ages or the geriatric ages, right? So like if somebody adopts a dog between like 6 and 10, you still have a dog that's wants to work, wants to do things, wants to engage, on the spectrum from shy to bold, right? Because so there's so many variables. So a senior dog that's shy, a senior dog that's working, a senior dog that's super bold, a senior dog with vibrant health, or a senior dog with underlying disease. So in general, and I have a lot of clients that like to adopt older dogs because they really don't want to go through the puppy stage because that's pretty time consuming and life changing. Is anytime you bring home a mature dog, like the young senior dog, the most important thing to do is, first of all, you're bringing home a new living being and you're establishing a new relationship. You're going to have the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And that dog has had a lot of years of experience without you. And you've been living life without them. And now you're starting this chapter together. So I think it's first off that humble moment of we've both had a lot of experiences in life. And now we're coming together and we kind of have to honor that about each other. So you have, really well managed household. You have a really established pattern because dogs love predictability, and you have really nourishing food because stress in transition is real, and the more nourishing, the better. And then you have a calmer household, especially with a senior dog. So nice soft music, 60 beats or less is very calming natural scents in your house. Nice physical exercise that's appropriate for the breed and the age, and a lot of contact time if that particular senior dog wants contact, whether that's being next to you, whether that's touch, whether that's contact with the pillow, but you nearby. But it's really consistent routine. And so the way that I look at social, emotional, physical, and nutritional is it's all really nutrition, because anything the body takes in is nutrition. It's what we see, it's what we hear, it's what we feel, it's what we eat. And so you're creating this whole environment where you're safe, you can trust my choices, and we're starting our chapter together. But you don't want to get a senior dog who's unknown to you and throw him into the frying pan of life and take off and overwhelm them with everything, because that level of stress can actually start disease or encourage the disease that may be underlying already. So so it's kind of that thing of welcoming your new relationship into the house and then saying, I'm going to honor everything about you that I don't know yet.
Right.
And I usually recommend that for the first 3 months.
One of the great points in what you just said is, and I don't think a lot of people realize how much, with senior dogs especially, we need to manage their stress, because stress is something that can start a cascade of disease and of really bad things in their system. So I know over the years, we found that while all dogs love routine, seniors are especially attuned to making sure they're going to bed at the same time, they're taking their walk, everything, whatever their routine is, it's the same all the time. So are there any other stress relief or sort of keeping things calm in the house that you would recommend when having an older dog, besides, say, soft music and the candles and having a nice routine?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, have you ever been to a spa before? Like when you walk into a spa, the moment you walk in, you feel everything come down and kind of soothe it, because they purposefully are creating an environment that kind of talks to all of your senses. You can trust it, it's safe, and it just brings everything down. And that's the same environment you're creating for a senior dog. And you don't have to turn your house into a spa, but when you have gentle music playing, and not the TV, a lot of people turn the TV on, not the TV, like gentle music, natural scents. If you've got a big garden outside, open your window, because those scents are always super calming. And and an environment that's not frenetic. So bringing a senior dog into a household with 5 busy children and 3 other dogs, that can be super stressful unless that senior dog was really super well socialized. And so when you bring a senior dog in, you don't need to have a geriatric home that's sedentary. In fact, that would probably not be good. But you want to have a home where they can wake up in the morning and say, when we wake up in the morning, we go outside to go to the bathroom. We come back in, we have a little snack together. We go outside and do chores together. We come back in and take a little nap. We go for a walk around the neighborhood. We come back in and take a little nap. We get ready for dinner. We go for another walk. We come back in and we go to bed together. Like, it's that predictable pattern of work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep is super important for a senior dog. Like napping, I would describe a senior dog house as the napping house, right? Because it's a lot of napping in between really appropriate good activities,
Right. And you talked about nutrition and how everything that comes into the body. So you're also a raw food advocate. But before we even get into that, you're also a farmer, and I see that you obviously have pastured animals, and your animals are living in a paradise out there. Yeah. Can you tell people, because I think especially in the US and in the UK and in Europe, it's a little different here, but in a lot of places, I don't think people understand the difference in food quality as far as what your dog's going to eat from an animal that is factory farmed, say a cow that's eating soy and grains, and chickens that are not eating their natural diet, and the quality difference in animals that were actually pastured and are eating their natural diets.
So that's like opening a giant can of worms.
Yes, I know.
Like huge. So the best way I can explain it is, I'm a natural rearing breeder of dogs, goats, ducks, and quail. And those are the species that I raise and work with. And so as far as a natural rearing breeder, I look at what the species is and what their system is designed to eat. So a species appropriate diet. And so when you're raising animals naturally and you're raising them for quality of life, quality of food product, or quality of fiber product, whatever it is you're raising them for, you always look for, do you have fresh water? Do you have a species appropriate diet for who you are? And do you have movement? And the movement part is oftentimes left out, but all animals need to move. All animals need to move. That's part of health, and they need ample time in the dirt, ample time in the sunshine, ample time in environments where they can, it's not sometimes just about the food, it's the acquisition of food, how they acquire food.
Right.
So like I could feed my goats grass, but them walking around and foraging and choosing the grasses that they want actually goes into the conversation of nutritional wisdom, where they're choosing the grasses they need when they need them for whatever health thing they need. And so the movement part is really super important. And then the more movement the animals have, the more they fertilize the soil, they tear up the soil through movement, and then they build more nutrition in the soil, which makes more nutritious grasses and forage, which creates more nutrition for the animals, which creates more nutrition for us. Right. So if you take away nutritional wisdom and you put an animal in a small space and say, I'm going to feed you what's easiest, most convenient, and cheapest to get you to grow the fastest in a shortest period of time to sell you to make the most amount of money, it's more of an economic monetary system than a natural rearing health system. So it's really two different worlds. It's two different planets because you're seeing the animal in two different ways. So one is about, I'm creating a species appropriate life for you to be the healthiest possible with the healthiest possible outcomes for nutrition for yourself and for us. Or you are a commodity and you are part of a monetary system. So it's looking at animals in two different lenses. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, and I think that I don't think most people, even veterinarians who recommend commercial dog food, probably say 99% of commercial dog food has, even when they say this is the chicken recipe, this is salmon, this is beef, people don't realize the proteins that are going into that food were animals that were raised in very rough conditions, as you say, for economic factors, because it's the cheapest. And obviously you get foods that are using the 4Ds, dead, dying, and disease, disabled animals. So it's sometimes tough because as we've moved, pet parents have now moved towards, they want to buy the best food for their dog or they want to prepare it at home. But we just did an interview recently with a holistic veterinarian from the UK, and he was saying that the reason so many veterinarians continue to recommend commercial foods is that's what they were taught in vet school. The education is subsidized by all of the big dog food companies. And I was saying, I lived in the US, I've lived in South America, I've lived in Europe. In every country, if you go into a vet's office, all of the books on their shelves are either by Royal Canin, Purina, any of the Nest companies. So what do you recommend when you have a client come to you? Because I know you include nutrition in that. Do you always recommend going raw? Do you recommend home cooking? Do you recommend some combination? Or what do you do if the client is insistent that, hey, I'm only going to get kibble and my dog will just have to deal with it?
So this conversation, as far as veterinary schools, kibble, and nutrition, goes back about 25 years for me. So I've been in this conversation for quite a long time. And I used to do some work with the PR directors of some veterinary schools. And I learned a lot about how the schools specifically in the United States are run. So in the veterinary, and this goes to how I counsel and coach clients in nutrition. So in our veterinary schools here, there's only one semester of clinical nutrition. So out of the 4 years they're in veterinary school, there's one semester of clinical nutrition based on what sustains life, based on the Merck pharmaceutical manual for minimal requirements of nutrition, not optimal, minimal requirements of nutrition, taught by Hill Science Diet, that is sponsored by the Morris Animal Foundation. So it's this long word salad of what is the minimal things we can get by with to provide nutrition. And oh, by the way, it happens to be our food that we're manufacturing and selling. So that's all they get. And then the holistic veterinarians, or the veterinarians that really do care about nutrition because they possibly have a better nutritional background that they grew up with, or they were raised on a farm where they actually know what real nutrition is, because food and nutrition are not synonymous. Those don't go. You can feed the belly and not nourish the system, or you can nourish the system. So we have TCVM vets, traditional Chinese veterinary medicine veterinarians. They have a nutritional overlay. They have really good background in home cooked, raw, kibble diets with top dressing of healthier foods. And so we do have some vets that have that background. I would say it's like as much as my pinky. Like very few vets have that background. And every conference, I used to go to veterinary conferences for almost 15 years and years ago. And I loved them because I wanted to learn about, what does psychotropic drugs do to a dog? Why are we using them with dogs? What's the latest orthopedic new surgery that they're doing for knees and ankles and ankle replacements? And I just found all that stuff like innately interesting and fascinating. And I stopped going when the conferences turned into how to make the most money out of each appointment, how to upsell your clients on food, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics and prescriptions, how to create an appointment and then upsell an extended appointment for an extended 15 minutes. And it was all sponsored by dog food companies and pharmaceutical companies. And so I stopped going because it stopped being about health. It stopped being about the canine, and it was all about business. And that's kind of when I had a realization of, if I'm not saying it, nobody else is going to tell family pet owners. And so I've been a very outspoken, very loud voice, especially in my community, in my state. And I wrote for years, and a lot of my articles went super, super far, and in my workshops and seminars. And, when you have somebody in a position of authority with a white coat on and a name tag, and they're saying, if you don't feed this, you are irresponsible, you are going to harm your dog, possibly kill your dog, and that's all going to be on you. Nobody wants to be the bad person. Nobody wants to do that. We all want to do the right thing. But when you get high marketing dollars, giving high marketing spiels of this is the best food and this is why, it's hard for a regular dog owner to parcel that information apart. And honestly, I don't believe everybody needs a PhD in kibble dog food in order to disseminate a bag of crap or something that's nourishing. I just don't think you need a PhD, but they've created that environment. I think it was just about a week ago, so in the United States, I don't believe it's been over in Europe. In the United States, since 2018, there's been this radical push that grain-free kibble is now giving dogs DCM, which is a heart disease. And it has just been punishing on the grain-free foods. And it just caught on like wildfire in the veterinary community, where they were telling owners, you have to feed glyphosate-soaked GMO grains in order for your dog to be healthy, because this completely healthy food is going to ruin their heart. And for some reason, people thought that made sense. And I've spoken out about that hugely. And I'm like, how is this even possible? Like, make that make sense on any level. And a week ago, a huge lawsuit came out, a massive lawsuit. I think it's $2.6 billion lawsuit naming Hill Science Diet and Purina and the veterinarians at Tufts University falsifying data to make the the grain-filled GMO foods appear to be healthier. So that was a day that we all had a little bit of party here, because finally, someone standing up and saying, hey, you unnecessarily scared family pet owners with their pets. You have been disseminating false information for all of these years. You have harmed companies who are actually producing species appropriate food. And I'm going to be watching that lawsuit as it goes through the weeks, months, or years. So anyway, that's the backside of where I've come from with food. And so say I get a client that comes in with a brand new puppy, we go over, what is your puppy's name? What is their age? What is their breed? Are they spayed or neutered? Are they intact? And just the basic stuff. And if it's a puppy that I kind of recognize a little bit, I'll ask what kennel it is, because I'm pretty familiar with all the kennels in the Rocky Mountain area of what they're producing. So I have a really good knowledge of the temperaments they're producing, or some health concerns in some of the kennels. So I can, give the owner a little heads up. If you see this, you want to, watch for that if it appears. And we go over what their goals are. Do they want to, we live in a super active mountain area. So do you want a hiking partner, a backcountry ski partner? Are you looking to travel with your dog? Do you want to do dog sports? Are you looking to get into search and rescue? Like, what is it? What is your main goal? I have very few clients that want just a dog to be at home in the yard. All of my clients, lots of fly fishing clients, want their dogs to love their drift boats so they can go fly fishing all over the state, which is super cool. And so we have active people that want active dogs to go do stuff, which is really cool to me. And so we go over that, and I kind of get an idea of the behaviors that would be good for that puppy to start with. And then we talk about nutrition. What did the breeder have the puppy on? Have you switched the food? If you switched the food, what have you switched to? If it's a good food and it's within their budget, because I never want to recommend something above someone's budget, because that becomes super stressful. I'll recommend additions. So if they're feeding a kibble that's not totally rotten and it's within their budget, I'll say, let's start adding fresh raw liver. Let's start adding raw egg yolk. Let's add raw goat's milk, because raw goat's milk for digestion is just incredible. And we'll start with that. And then every month we'll start trying adding new and different things as well, like maybe a raw chicken wing, or maybe a raw duck neck. And it kind of gets the person comfortable with providing nutrition for their dog without having to buy the bag and read the bag, right? But I do have, I would say, at least half of my clients want to feed raw. Not necessarily make their own, and we have a lot of commercial options, but I do have some clients who really appreciate making their own, because where we live, we're in a food bowl. We have ample opportunity for cow, pig, lamb, goat, pretty much everything. Fish is the lowest thing. Fish is not high in Montana, so fish is pretty low. And then if I have someone come in with a senior dog, we look at the senior dog's history. If they have the history of the senior dog, we look at what the senior dog has been on, what kind of food, if there's any underlying disease or discomfort in the dog. And if the dog looks healthy and they have good energy, there's no underlying disease, we keep them on the food they're on, and we start top dressing it with raw, healthful options, and slowly decrease the kibble and increase the healthful options. But we don't go cold turkey and stress a senior dog system.
Since we're on the subject of raw, can you give us, so obviously there are still people a little bit afraid of raw food.
Yeah.
I think it's always, it's rarely justified, but tell us, what are some raw precautions you would take? So if somebody's watching this or watching one of our channels and they say, you know what, I'm going to go with home cooked food. I want to give them the right species, appropriate diet. Some safety tips for as far as how to select the types of meats they're giving and the types of foods they're giving. Are there some that they should avoid?
So everyone's comfort levels are different. If you barbecue, you're already handling raw meat. So there shouldn't be an issue. But like I have clients who don't eat meat themselves, but they know that their dog does need meat. And so how I explain it to them is a dog's system, how they were designed and how their teeth look. So if a dog has mountains in the back on their molars and they have the sharp canines, these are not chewing teeth. These are grabbing, ripping, tearing teeth to get food down.
Right.
So they're designed to eat meat, bone, and organs. That is what their system is designed to eat. So if they say, look, I don't want the hassle with that. I've got young kids in the house. I just want something easy. I'm super busy. We have so many commercial raw food options right now that it takes that factor out of it. So with commercial raw food, it's a little bit more expensive, but what you're doing is actually purchasing your education. Because once you start seeing your dog not just be your dog, but a vibrantly healthy dog who gets super stoked to eat their food, who actually smells good, whose coat feels amazing, it starts to make you feel different about what you're feeding. So if I have someone who says, you know what, I don't want to touch raw food, I don't want to deal with this, I'm uncertain about it, what I always do is say, let's just start with a commercial raw diet.
Right.
We'll start with just, XYZ diet. We're going to get the beef formula. It comes in little patties. And we're going to take a handful of the kibble out and put in half of a raw patty. And we're just going to start with that. And because I want your dog's kibble to be more healthful, and I want your dog to be stoked about eating. And then in a month from there, how's your dog doing? Is your dog doing okay? Yeah, my dog loves eating. My dog's doing super good. We're not having problems with weight. My dog's starting to smell better. I notice there's no tartar buildup on the teeth. This is really nice. I'm like, cool. Let's do that little bit of kibble, the half of the raw patty, and let's add a raw duck neck every other day. And so we increase it over time for my clients who are a little reluctant, a little hesitant, or super busy, or have a very tight budget. So, and I'm always really aware of that because I don't want to push someone past their comfort level, because this is for the long haul, right? This is not just for a week. This is for the long haul. So, and then for my clients who say, no, I want a really healthy dog. I've been wanting to feed raw for a while. We eat healthy ourselves, but I just don't have the knowledge, and I'm afraid I may not balance it correctly or goof it up. I still say, let's do a commercial raw diet first, because then your dog's getting nourished while you read and build your education. And we go over, while they're feeding a commercial raw diet, I'll say, to that commercial raw diet, let's add a little bit extra liver because you guys are really active and busy. Let's add a little bit of raw goat's milk and just a little bit more digestive fire, especially with a senior dog, because their digestive fire kind of wanes with age. So let's add a little more raw goat's milk, good digestive fire, good pre and probiotics, amazing source of glutathione to clean those toxins out of the system. It's like a giant hug on the inside for a senior dog, right? And so they start getting familiar with other ingredients to add to the food, which is really super cool. And, but then we talk about, let's make one meal together, 50% meat, 30% meat with bone, like a carcass or a back, 10 to 15% fruit or vegetable ground up so the cellulose is broken down, and 5 to 10% organ meats. And a lot of my clients have never purchased organ meats before. They just purchase muscle meats. And so it's really kind of cool because I can introduce them to all of the processors and meat shops we have within like a 20-minute driving distance in our valley. I get to tell them about all the stores in town, the grocery stores and markets that have gorgeous organs beautiful muscle meats that are varied and digestible bones, you know? And so it kind of opens a whole new world of possibilities because they didn't even know those items even existed. But we start really slowly, you know, we start slowly. And then if I have a client who says, I want to feed kibble and I want to feed raw, but I don't know if I have the budget for it. I don't know if I have the time for it. And my partner, my husband, my wife is not on board with me. I'm like, cool, we're going to change the kibble to a better kibble. And then we're going to start carcass feeding. And so once a week, you're going to buy a whole chicken and you're going to cut that chicken into quarters. And then on Monday, you're going to give your dog a quarter of that chicken and sit out in the backyard and watch your dog eat it and enjoy the fresh air together. And then give them the kibble at night. And then on Wednesday, skip Tuesday, on Wednesday, you're going to feed another quarter chicken. And all of a sudden, they see their dog's teeth just get shiny within a month. You know, absolutely beautiful. They see their dog's digestion improving. And it's always the smell. Raw-fed dogs just smell better. Like, have you ever put your nose behind your dog's ear? It just smells better, you know? But sometimes the carcass feeding is the least expensive way if you're on a super tight budget. If your whole household is not on board with you, it's a really super easy way to feed your dog the skin, the meat, and the bone, which is really beautiful. And it's all digestible and it's good for the teeth. They get to actually use all the teeth how they were created to be used, with ripping, tearing, grinding, and swallowing. And their stools improve almost immediately, you know, to what they should be. Yeah. And that's the other thing. Raw-fed dogs don't have stinky poop.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
When dogs are eating home prepared, whether it's raw or partially raw, partially cooked, two things that people are usually surprised by: the stool and, their breath no longer smells bad. And I've seen online debates on YouTube, on different social media. My dog's breath is really bad. What should I do? And then everybody comes in with a product recommendation, and you go, you're not dealing with the problem. And the problem is there's bad foods going into their system and basically rotting inside of them. And now they have this breath. Dogs, in all my years of having dogs, I've never had one with bad breath. And that's because they eat real food. And like you said, they don't, in general, their bodies smell, everything smells better. They don't have that old dog smell.
Yep.
And that's because, as you said, it's from the inside out you're building their nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so most kibbles have filler ingredients that are designed for silage for cows, right? They're not designed for dogs, but it's cheap filler ingredients. So you can get a bag of kibble that's slightly affordable. Those ingredients and the way that it digests so much slower and such in a different way that you actually build pathogenic bacteria instead of beneficial bacteria that actually hugs the gut and hugs the immune system that takes care of the whole system. So it's a whole, right? And so what they put into the stomach counts for a lot.
So one thing I did want to ask, since we're on, topping, or for people who want to start slow and think, that your video on your YouTube channel of your smoothies.
Yeah.
If you could walk us through, it doesn't have to be the exact recipe, but some of the things you put in them, because we do something very similar using supplements. And I don't think most people really think about that. Normally when it comes to dogs, it was just a beautiful thing. So if you could walk us through some of your favorites and what you use.
Yep. So I started doing smoothies for my senior dogs. And what it is I'm taking healthful ingredients that actually nourish the system, put good bacteria into the gut to nourish the lining of the gut and to encourage a healthy immune system. But by making it a smoothie, so it's broken down, it's easier to digest, especially anything with cellulose in it, like fruits or vegetables. And so I'll use raw eggs, the whole shell and the egg, as long as it's a farm fresh egg. Any egg in the store has been dipped in chemicals, so you don't want to use those shells, even organic eggs. So if it's a farm fresh egg, you just rinse it off and you put it into your smoothie blender. And then I always use a beneficial oil like camelina oil or olive oil. I'll put that in there. Sometimes avocado oil, but I don't buy that one a whole lot. If I have tallow, I render a lot of tallow from our animals. If I have tallow, I'll put tallow in there. And tallow is just, I would say, the number one fat oil that I would use with dogs, especially if they're active, because it's such a beneficial bioavailable fat, with such good nutrition in it. So eggs, a little bit of tallow, chlorella or spirulina, any kind of algae. Algae is just great for inflammation, for clearing toxins, for brain health, for heart health. Algae's awesome. And then whatever fruit or vegetable I have that's dark, so blueberries, raspberries, sweet potatoes, winter squash, dark leafy greens, but minimal, not a whole lot. And in our gardens in the summertime, we have a lot of like wild greens, like purslane, dandelion, goosefoot, and all of the wild greens just come with way more nutrition. And so I'll put some of that in there. I blend it up, and then I put it in with their raw food. Or if we have leftover meat from the night before, I'll just take the meat and the smoothie and put it in a bowl for a snack after we go do chores. So it's a really great way to get really available nutrition into the system really quickly. And sometimes, like for my senior dogs, I'll put slightly warmed bone broth in there because bone broth is excellent for the senior system.
Actually, yeah, we are. I would describe us as militant bone broth users, and we recommend. And
Yay.
I think even if you are on a budget, I mean, for the most part, you could make a great bone broth pretty much for free. If you already have vegetables in your house, most butchers will give you bones because they're going to throw them out anyway. Supermarkets charge you a little bit for them, but in the long haul. And I think when it comes to bone broth, I've actually, it became so popular for humans in the last 10, 12 years. And then I've seen a little backlash against it, like, bone broth's really not that good. It just has some vitamins and minerals. But those people miss the fact that there is so much collagen, a bioavailable collagen in bone broth, that not only would help an older dog with their joints, but the impact on gut health. And of course, when the gut is healthy, so are the joints because you have less inflammation.
Yep.
So what do you use as far as your bone broth? Is it just straight up bones and some vegetable scraps? Do you mix them up? Do you do what I would call, say, a wild broth, meaning, for instance, we use whatever we have, chicken, turkey, we have fish broths, we have beef and pork. Occasionally when we can get wild boar or some of these more exotic meats, we use those as well. Is that similar?
Yes, it's all of the above. So I would say the most collagen-rich bone broth that we make is oxtail. So it's the cow's tail. And oxtail broth, I love it. My dogs love it. And so when I make the bone broth, I just fill water over the bones. And then I don't bring it to a hard boil. It's that low rolling simmer where you can see the bubbles underneath the surface, but it's not a hard boil. And I'll let it go, depending on which bone it is, 2 to 12 hours. And then I let it cool, but I don't put any like salt or pepper in it because my dogs are going to use it and I'm going to use it as well. And so we have jars of different types of bone broth. We have the chicken oxtail we make almost every other day. We are hunters, and so we have elk and deer bones as well. And elk bone broth is pretty amazing. Yeah, deer bone broth, it's hard to get it. The Jello stage. Deer is really hard to get to the Jello stage. Elk has really good collagen in it. We do use, when we butcher our goats, we do use their bones as well. And so for me, with our farm and with hunting, when we have deer, elk, or goat bones for bone broth, I know those animals have no vaccines in them, no commercial wormers in them, no chemicals in them. And so when we make bone broth, it's the purest form of collagen-rich broth that you can have. And I'm always so appreciative and grateful when we have those bones in our freezer. If we don't, and I have to buy them, I always look for a farmer ranch, because in Montana, it is legal to go straight to a farmer ranch and buy directly from them without government interference. And so, and it's way less expensive. And they always have bones in their freezer from when they've processed animals and stuff. And I'll just get like a 20 to 40 pound box of bones, and I don't care what they are. And then about every other day, I just fill a pot. We make bone broth. I freeze some. I have some in the fridge, but we always have something going. So we have always a source of it in the house. And then for me, I'll take one of our raw duck egg yolks and I'll beat it into the bone broth, a little salt and pepper, and that's mine. And for my dogs, I'll take either some of our quail eggs or duck egg yolk and put it in there, because the yolk with the bone broth almost is complete nourishment for the lining of the gut. So if they have, like, senior dogs can get leaky gut really easily because it's aging, right? It kind of aids in sealing and protecting the lining. So the lining of the gut is healthier. So the bacteria, the microbiome, can also be healthier. And, my dogs love it. And even my puppies. So whether I'm raising a litter, I've got middle-aged dogs or senior dogs, bone broth is just regular. That's just part of almost everything. Just because it's so super nourishing.
The two biggest things, other than diet, in addition to the diet change, the two biggest impactors of senior dog health that I've seen, especially if I've adopted one who is already older and they've had some issues, bone broth and any sort of probiotic food like raw milk, raw goat's milk, or kefir. These two have, I can only describe it as a drug-like effect. It is more powerful than any pharmaceutical I've ever seen.
Correct, but nobody can make big money on it, so no one's going to talk about it. Yeah. So bone broth, I think, is Mother Nature's gift, right? If we eat like our grandparents ate, everybody would be healthier, right? Because they always made soups with bone stock, our grandparents and great-grandparents. The dogs always got the leftovers from whatever grandma made, which was always the bone broth and meats and vegetables out of the gardens. And so if we go back to simpler, more nourishing foods, it's better for everybody. When it's really interesting you say that, because like sometimes I'll have clients and they'll say, oh, I don't want to feed my dog people food, human food. I want to feed him dog food. I'm like, great, then give him what you're making for dinner, because that's more dog food than what's in the bag, And so, the real nourishing foods were purposefully targeted, and I believe almost hijacked as poison for dogs, just so bags of dog food would sell better, So if we get back to more nourishing foods and simpler foods, it doesn't have to be rocket science. And even if you only add bone broth and raw goat's milk, those two things alone are like, raw goat's milk is a complete food all in itself. Like when our goats are in milk, that's all we drink. I would say 50% of our diet is goat's milk when our goats are in milk. Yeah, because it's that nourishing. Yeah.
Absolutely. A couple months ago, actually, we did a video that said, it's a bit of a clickbaity title, but should dogs eat people food? Should senior dogs eat? And my answer in the first part of the video was no, they should not. Because meat and pork and fish and vegetables and fruits are not people food. They are food. People food are things that come in a bag and a box and that are kept on the shelves for months on end. And really, dog food that is sold at the dog store is closer to what the average person eats than what, a dog should be eating, which is, it's not people food, it's just food.
Right. Well, but for how many decades have people been taught that their species appropriate diet was bad and commercial, highly processed foods were better? And because it's money, right? It all goes back to money again. And like if you go back into dog food history, like say 2,000 years ago, like the only written information they could find is farmers would give dogs leftover bones and barley biscuits that they didn't eat for dinner. And then the dogs could scavenge for whatever other food they had. And that was the dog's primary diet. And so it was raw meaty bones and barley biscuits, and that was pretty much it. And whatever they foraged and could get. And if you look at village dogs, like if you look at any village populations of dogs, they're eating everything that people did not eat, and they're also scavenging for the food that they know they want, which is nutritional wisdom as well, right? And I think this is where I think the industry has hijacked a bunch of people, is because dogs are predators and opportunistic scavengers, we can and do nutritionally abuse them because they will eat toilet paper, socks, cantaloupe, bananas, hot dogs, Dorito chips, and meat, and organs, and bone. And because they're so opportunistic, we can take advantage of that. But then, like in comparison, if you look at cats are obligated. They are obligated to eat 100% meat, organ, and bone, and if they don't, they get disease very quickly. Like if you have people out here watching who have dogs and cats, how many cats have kitty leukemia, kitty kidney disease, because they're on an artificial diet that is not species appropriate, right? So, and I think the dog food, people food conversation, like using those terminologies, I do believe that was weaponized on purpose, because food is food, like you said. Food is food, right? People 2,000 years ago, there was no such thing as dog food or people food. It was just food and what was left over to the dog, right? But I think that was weaponized because that way they could parcel apart, in this bag here is just for your dog, what you're eating is not, even though it's super helpful, right? And so I guess how I would explain it is what's in the bag is food made by humans for dogs, but it is not dog food. And what's species appropriate food for dogs is mostly what we consume if we're eating a healthful diet. So like in our household, we eat an old-fashioned diet like my grandparents. We eat meats, bone broths, organs, lots of organ meats, and the fruits and vegetables we eat are from our garden, which are winter squashes, summer squashes, raspberries, garlic. Montana is a really small growing season, so we have things that can grow here, but it's not like other parts of the world where you can grow year round. We have a 3-month growing season, so it's got to be fast. And so what we eat are also the same foods our dog can eat. And so it's kind of a full circle, how it works on our farm. We feed our quail, duck, and goats very well, which is species appropriate. They nourish our soil with their manure. Their manure goes into our compost. Our compost goes into our garden to grow really healthful fruits and vegetables that then comes back to nourish us and our dogs. So it's a full circle, right? It goes full circle. And because no animals on our property have commercial wormers or vaccines or any other kind of drugs, that manure is pure nutrition for the soil without adding any chemicals to anything. So, there's quality to it, but it's also, you can feel the sunshine to the earth, to the plants, to the animals, to our system. So it's all full circle. Yeah.
That is really how things should be. We're very fortunate because we live in Sicily. That is how things are here. People are pretty obsessed with the concept of, it's called kilometer zero, which means you want to eat food that was raised, grown, produced within 1 kilometer of your house.
Yes.
Where you live. So the dogs benefit, we benefit, but I do feel bad for those who are still stuck in places where they're either on I think it's called a food desert, or they're in places where you go to the supermarket and you just have to deal with the best you can with the food you're given, and that's really not great food. And then their dogs suffer with it.
Yep. So we're in a huge agricultural state. Like the state I live in has more probably cows and sheep than people, right? It's just a big agricultural state. And even though I live very close to the city here, and it would be a small city compared to where you live, but a city, you only have to drive 5 to 10 miles to find a farm or a ranch with an abundant amount of food. And so your program you have in Sicily is similar to what I describe as eating place. When you eat place, you're eating food that was grown in the same air, the same soil, and the same environment in which you live, and it's symbiotic with your system. Like the energy is the same, right? And that energy is nourishing you versus you eating a vegetable that's from 5,000 miles away, right? Because that doesn't have the same energy you have. So eating place is helpful. When you get into the cities where it's a food desert, when you get into towns where it's not agricultural, it's more industrial, that's when, you have to do the best you can. You just, and you can't beat yourself up about it or feel ashamed or judged. You say, look, where I live, it is not agricultural, and so I'm going to go to my local grocer, and try to go to a local grocer instead of a big conglomerate grocery store, right? A local grocer, and I'm going to do the best I can, and if they're buying from farms that are closest to us as possible, I'm going to support it that way, and if you have farmers markets, farmers who come into your city, like the food desert cities, always support farmers markets because they're bringing you in the best possible products and saying, you don't even have to drive to us, we will come to you. And going to a farmer's market, you can nourish yourself, your dog, everything. And you also get good conversation, which is also nourishing. You make connections, you make friendships, and then your food takes on a whole different meaning. It's not just filling your shopping cart. It's actually knowing who did that for you,
I hope that, that those who are in those situations can get access to farmers markets. Because, like you said, it can be very rough if your best choice is supermarket and fruit and vegetables are coming from who knows where, maybe not even in the same country you're in, which I know happens a lot, and the same with the meat. So, like you said, do your best and find your best options. Even in some of the worst places, you could still find, almost always you can find some sort of farm fresh egg from somewhere. Somebody's selling you somewhere. You just gotta look for them. And if that's the best option, weaponize it.
Yep. Well, I started ranchable feeding for my dogs about 23 years ago. And so I had a dog who had a health condition specifically from kibble. They're called struvite bladder stones. And it's when a dog cannot absorb and eliminate the synthetic calcium and phosphorus in kibble. And so I was given the option to put her on a kibble that was void of all nutrition and had no food products in it. It was just synthetic blobs of whatever. Or leave the clinic and figure it out on my own. And thank goodness I had enough sense to say, that doesn't make sense. Like, no, I'm not feeding for that bag. And our entire agility competition club was feeding raw at the time. And two of the people in the club acted as my mentors and got me started. But I had young children, a whole house full of border collies. Our budget was super tight, and what they were feeding I couldn't afford. So I started reaching out to farms and ranches, and I learned that I could not only nourish our family with incredible fresh food, but I could nourish my dog with food that was grown in the mountains around us. And it actually is reachable. So once you meet your farmers, once you meet your ranchers, your food becomes more healthful, more nutrient dense, and almost all the time less expensive.
Almost
yeah.
I don't think a lot of people have to really show them the math. They say, well, I use X kibble or Y kibble, and I say, well, this is costing you $100 or €100 a bag. For that amount of much more real food for actually less money. You just have to fit it in. It might take a little bit of work, and it might feel like a lot of work at the beginning, like you said, but as you get used to it, it's actually not that difficult, and you end up really saving money in the long term. Especially when you consider not just the dollar or the euro you're putting out, but what that is buying in terms of nutrition.
Yeah.
Because the dollar worth of dog food and the dollar worth of grass-fed cow are two different worlds as far as nutrition.
Well, if someone's paying €100 for a bag of kibble, 75 euros are going to fillers, not nutrition. If you spend 100 euros with your rancher, you're getting 100 euros worth of nutritionally dense, really important nutrition. So that's not even apples and oranges, that's apples and screwdrivers. that's like so different. Yeah.
Okay, it's over, almost out of time. So I just wanted to thank you because this has been amazingly helpful, and I'm sure everybody watching is. Hopefully they've been inspired to, at least if they're not quite at the raw or the home prepared stage, that they take some of your suggestions, start that process, and the acclimation process, even if it starts with buying raw commercial, and then give them their nutritional education and when it comes to senior dogs, the number two things that absolutely affect longevity and health span are diet and gut health. And we can only really solve those by going with a natural diet or as close to natural as possible.
Yeah, so with longevity, and this is what I could add and say to this, that since I've been raw feeding, and since my dogs have a lot of movement on the earth in sunshine, and they're outside a great deal of the day, they have a home that they can trust and that is safe, and they have that combination. My dogs don't die from disease, they die from old age. And for that, very, very grateful. And there's a huge difference in that, right? And so when you're going for nutrition advice for a senior dog, never look at the marketing for a senior dog. Look at the dog that's for you and say, what can I do to nourish your system so you can take care of yourself? And that's almost the best first question you can ask. And then you take those small steps and you keep getting better. Because I think information on health is limitless. Like, we could go forever and ever and still continue to learn more about health. But to add more and more healthful, nutritionally dense food to your senior dog's diet over time to allow their system to be as optimal as possible so they can take care of themselves until they are ready to die, and hope is on their own terms because of old age, Yeah.
Okay, well, we want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. This has been incredibly informative. And where should people check you out online? Is there a specific place you want to be found? Is it your site or your store? Or check out the farm?
Yes. All of it. Yeah, the pawsandpeople.com is our main site, and you can access all of my information off of there. That kind of is the motherland for all of our information.